know. Rishi Sunak, here he is saying he's ending the war on drivers. This has been a big interview with The Sun and a big win, in fact, for The Sun's Give Us a Break campaign, which has been championing the rights of drivers for a long time. And the Prime Minister has attacked what he calls harebrained schemes like low-traffic neighbourhoods and 20-mile-per-hour zones forced on Britain's 40 million cash-strapped drivers. I mean, do you think he has a point?
Well, I think that the Sun's campaign has a point in terms of standing up for motorists, and clearly, when you unpick this, there are some sensible things in it. But overall, it seems to me this is a rather sort of desperate attempt to try and say something to distract attention from the decision that he maybe has made but hasn't told us yet on HS2. If you read the interview, he talks all the way through about, I'm pro-car. People talk about trains too much. What's going to come in a few days' time?
One particular train.
Absolutely, one particular train. I mean, the politics of it, I'm a Mancunian, and the politics of going, it's a bit like people going to Portsmouth and saying we're going to cut the Navy. Nobody would ever do it. But going to Manchester and saying we're not going to give you a train is just absolutely ridiculous.
Well, before we do a cheeky little accidental dive into HS2, shall we hear what Sunak had to say to The Sun's very own Harry Cole? Yeah. Here it is.
I'm slamming the brakes on the war on motorists. It's as simple as that.
How?
Well, one thing that I've realised, politicians for too long, they always want to make short-term decisions, take the easy way out, without any thinking about how that is actually just going to impact ordinary people. And this war on motorists is a perfect example of that. I've been very clear. When I was Chancellor, I wanted to support people because most people use their cars to get around. That's why I cut and then froze fuel duty, something that the Sun rightly campaigned on, that's saving people about £100 in the last year alone. But what we want to do now is make sure that all these kind of harebrained schemes to force on local communities, whether it's low traffic neighbourhoods, whether it's blanket 20-mile-an-hour speed limits, all of that, we need to stop.
Do you know, Matthew Laza and I laughing watching that video? It looks like he's sitting in the back of a bus, doesn't it? Because he sort of bobs up and down like this every now and then. Sort of like
I'm now conscious of mine.
Like he's going over some low-traffic neighbourhood speed humps.
He's bouncy.
He's bouncy. It's sort of like, he's still for a while and then it's like boing, boing, boing.
Yeah, it really is that kind of head boy sort of vibes that he gives out.
He does. But, I'm with him on this. I mean, the problem is he's done a little bit like he did before with the climate change thing, the net zero thing. We said, we're not going to put a tax on meat. There's not going to be 7 bins. And we were all like, what?
Nobody has 7 bins. Yeah. I was asked a question to somebody the other day. Is Labour going to introduce compulsory veganism?
And he's like, we're rolling back the blanket 20-mile-per-hour zone in the UK. It's like, but there isn't one.
Yes, absolutely. And Labour isn't going to introduce compulsory veganism.
But the point is, frankly, I'm a driver and I've got my car in West London and I don't use it in London. It's there for when I want to escape and see the old ball and chain in Wiltshire. But it's a nightmare just driving anywhere in the UK. I'm a law-abiding citizen, right? I pay the highest rate of tax. I always send out my, tax returns on time. I've never tried to squirrel money away. I'm probably, the most honest, decent person. I'm such a goody two-shoes, basically. I don't have it in my I don't have a bone in my body that would even sort of, claim 1 pence more. Well, I don't know about that. But don't. My mum listens to this show. But what bothers me is I feel like living in the United Kingdom today, especially as a driver, it's like walking through a minefield of fines. And it's like, I live my life as well as possible. And there's still letters coming in saying, well, you were loitering in one of those yellow boxes. And it's like, but that's because the traffic didn't move for half an hour. Yes. And I had fully expected it to not be stranded in the middle of a junction. Because sometimes these things just happen. And the problem with the 20-mile-an-hour zone is there's a 10% limit. So if you go 23 miles per hour, in theory, and there was a camera there, you're papped. As a driver, it's actually impossible to monitor that. The difference between driving 20 miles per hour and 23 miles per hour is not even detectable from the pressure of the foot on an accelerator. And I worry that what's going to happen is people are just staring at the speedometer and they don't know if they're ploughing down babies in buggies because they're more interested in trying not to get fined.
The reverse effect from the one it's meant to.
Right.
Yeah, look, I think first of all he's clearly he's onto a winner on blanket 20 mile an hour. So I don't think anybody's actually proposed a blanket 20 mile an hour speed. Labour in Westminster certainly hasn't. Yes, Labour in Wales is doing it. It's not not 20 miles an hour across the whole of Wales. It's 20 miles an hour in built-up neighbourhoods in the whole of Wales. But even so, there's a lot of kickback in Wales about it. This week, for instance, apparently it's having a very big impact on bus services because in London, a bus can never get more than 20 miles an hour because traffic's too heavy and there are too many people getting on and off and too many stops. But if you're in Wales and spread out and, the bus is going between, villages in the valleys and it's suddenly got to slow down every time it comes to anywhere residential. So there's now talk of bus cuts in Wales, which obviously affects poorer, older and younger people more than anybody else, which is exactly reverse of what the policy is meant to do. So I think there's a bit of a irony that in the interview with Harry that Rishi talks about not wanting to have blanket policies, but this is a blanket no to 20 mile an hour.
Right.
They clearly have to be used with care. And as we've seen, low traffic neighbourhoods, I've never really got my head round. They're deeply unpopular. Bizarrely, the first, but basically every London borough introduced them, and then pretty much certainly every Labour-run London borough, and then places around the country. But the first borough to get rid of them is the most left-wing borough in London, which is Tower Hamlets, inner-city Tower Hamlets, which is run by a sort of a hard-left guy thrown out of the Labour Party.
Yeah.
And they've just got rid of them, or they've said they're about to get rid of them, physically remove those barriers that annoy people. I think there's nothing socialist necessarily about having a low-traffic neighbourhood, and sometimes it is giving. I have very strong views about cyclists and their impact on public transport. For example, I don't drive, but I'm fed up of sitting in a bus where there used to be a bus lane and now there's what I used to call them the ZIL lanes. Like in the Soviet Union when they had the special lanes for the elites to go in the ZIL Russian cars.
It is. They are
they're a little bit like that because it's the sort of posh people going.
It's the quinoa club.
Absolutely, it's the quinoa club. Absolutely. While the cleaners cleaning the government buildings are stuck on the buses going between their two jobs.
Yeah, no,
so
it's a fair
it's all about it's all about common sense. Of course, look, we all know. From villages, from suburbs, where there have been endless campaigns to get 20 mile an hour zones. When a child's been killed, understandably, parents are often calling for them, and they want certain traffic lanes. So it's about common sense, and I think that there's a lack of common sense.
To me, there's a lot of hypocrisy in all of this. So I actually feel that what's going on here is, when you have that sort of awful boss at work who makes your life hell because they're trying to soft fire you, they want you to hand in your resignation because they don't want to break employment law.
Yes.
And so they make your life as awful as possible until, whatever, the worst happens. I feel like they're doing that. The government and Sadiq Khan is doing that on motorists. So they just make it more difficult day by day by day to own a car, whether it's the cost of taxation, whether it's, speed limits, whether it's speed cameras, whether it's ULEZ, 20 mile per hour. It's just impossible these days to drive with impunity. And the problem I've got with this is, and I'm going to sound like a bit of a feminist here, but I know.
Heaven forfend.
I know. But I think, there's a big argument that women have a different claim on cars perhaps to men. So argument number one, women cycling. So men, you kind of wear school uniform all your life, don't you?
Yeah.
So you wear your trousers and you can get on a bike. With us, it's so much more complicated with helmet, hair and all of that. Secondly,
I don't have that problem. If I was a cyclist, I wouldn't have
Secondly, depending, if you're a woman who's working a shift quite late and you get on the tube or a bus or whatever, you're going to get the leery drunks and you don't feel safe. Thirdly, if you're up the duff and weigh 200 kilos, there you go, not 2 kilos, that would be someone very poorly. The pregnant woman needs to be able to ferry herself about
I'm amazed you used
safely.
kilos there, Alex. That was a little bit. I thought we'd been.
That was very non-Brexit, wasn't it? I know.
Didn't go unnoticed. It's because you're young.
It's because I'm young, exactly. But I think there's all these reasons that it's like people sit there, the sort of the quinoa club of this world, who people like Sadiq Khan have his own caravan of SUVs anyway. And then the hypocrisy of this is, 20 miles per hour, less likely to, kill a child. But you know what? If you've got an electric vehicle, you can basically get rid of that, because electric vehicles weigh the same as, the Eiffel Tower deconstructed and shoved in the back of a lorry. They're huge things.
Yeah, and they also, of course, don't make as much noise, and therefore there is an issue about electric vehicles, about people not being able to.
So what is going on? Is this for sort of like saving kiddies' lives, or is this for essentially bullying drivers into giving up their vehicles?
Look, I think it's exactly the same thing as with bike lanes, cycle lanes, which is that people. It's this one-size-fits-all approach, which is literally what they've done in Wales. It's one size fits all, and as long as you've got some houses, you're getting a 20 mile an hour speed limit, and it's about one size fits all. It's about saying that here's just like that, we can put one policy down and it will sort everything out. It's people jumping on bandwagons, and look,
electric bandwagons.
Look, it's slightly unrelated, but you know how at the moment, so for the last sort of 15 years, you've not been allowed to build, certainly in a city, you've not been allowed to build an office block or flats without it being a mixed-use development, which means you've got to have space for shops underneath. But we are at peak shop. We do not need any more empty shops.
Also, shops are closing down because everyone's getting things droned in from Amazon.
So you see all these empty shops under blocks of flats and blocks of offices because somebody 20 years ago decided that that this was the fashionable thing. It's about following fashions. It's about thinking that one solution can sort everything out. I'm not saying we don't want 20 mile per hour. Not easy to say. Zones where they make sense, where there are particular traffic accident black spots, where there is a proper case for them. But it's about saying that that we're going to do everything because, as you say, war on the motorist. Look, remember when John Prescott? That's a blast from the past. When John Prescott came in and was given transport in his massive department.
2 Jags, 3 Jags. What was it? How many Jags?
A lot of Jags.
All the Jags.
Absolutely. And Pauline and her Jag in the hair, which is one of those great conference moments that's rehashed at this time of year. So what happened is that there was then it was thought that Labour was having a war on the motorists because he said he wanted to get people out of their cars. There's a big difference from saying that we might use our cars less to saying that we're not going to use cars at all.
But they're not giving us viable alternatives.
Absolutely.
And let's
there's a rail strike today. Rishi Sunak can't even get the train to his own conference because there's a rail strike.